Say goodbye to jump scares. Modern horror is now all about the 3 sacred G's of psychological dread: grief, guilt, and generational trauma. At least, that's what the internet would have you believe. Studios like A24 often get credited as being the tastemakers of the style. But come on now. Everyone's riding the same wave. Even Hollywood's in on it. And video games. If you're curious about why horror's changing, why not stick around? We'll explore the resurgence of social commentary, why we're craving this type of fear, and whether our collective anxieties are the real monster all along. And more. It definitely doesn't hurt that these films are so cheap to pump out. You don't need a $5 million CGI budget ensuring that every single green screen pixel never breaks your viewer's immersion. All you really need to do is just set a grieving family around a dinner table and have them scream at each other instead. When these visual effects typically eat up 20 to 30% of your total production costs, that's a lot of savings. So let's look at some numbers. Numbers are fun, aren't they? Hereditary cost $10 million to make and earned $80 million. The Witch, $4 million, grossed $40 million. Wait for it. Get Out cost $4.5 million. And you know how much they made? $255 million. That's a 56 times return on your investment. Absolutely insane. Compare that to something like World War Z, with its $190 million budget and multiple production nightmares. While it was ultimately a commercial success, its ROI was pretty damn modest by comparison. I think it only netted like a 2 to 3x or something. And then there's the Resident Evil franchise. Pumping millions into CGI zombies and zombie dogs while having Mila Jovovich do cable-assisted backflips across the world's most fiscally irresponsible escape room. Lower budgets means lower risk, which means more creative freedom. When your overheads are that small, you can afford to experiment with all the fun stuff like unconventional plots and open-ended storytelling. It gets even better for studios like A24, who built a whole cult following, an entire cultural identity around their brand. When your audience will pay you $50 for a midsummer Christmas tree topper, or $60 for an Auditor of the Month butt plug, you've transcended film economics. You can do whatever the hell you want at that point.
Sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
Love it or hate it, social commentary is yet another reason why psychological horror is dominating right now. But why is that? Well, my theory is that both storytellers and audiences are trying to make sense of a world that feels broken. Even if we can't do much about it, we'll at least try to understand why it's breaking. And satire is perfect for that. Pearl is an incredible film. Have you seen it? On the surface, it's a slasher, but if you look closer, it's a portrait of mental illness, female repression, and the illusion of the American dream. But then you have movies like Get Out, which turns the social commentary up to 11. What begins as an awkward meet the girlfriend's parents weekend fakes you out into a surreal, satirical horror about racially charged body snatching.
But please don't lump me in with that. You know, I could give a shit what color you are. No. What I want is deeper.
Yeah, real deep, Jim. But there it is again, the social commentary being slipped in. Subtle, but damn does it work. If Hereditary shows us that the villain is the breakdown of family values, then Get Out shows us that the villain is society itself. Hang on a second. Some of you might be saying, but Sean, horror's always flirted with social commentary. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Rosemary's Baby, Night of the Living Dead. They were all packed with themes of social anxieties and class conflict. And you'd be absolutely right. But here's the thing. I'd argue that today, modern horror is now leaning into it hard. And if you think this trend's slowing down, this is the last example before we move on, I promise. But look at Sinners. Highly successful vampire film where the blood-sucking isn't just about feasting on our creamy insides, but about generational trauma, passed down through centuries of cultural erasure and colonial exploitation. Point is, mainstream horror is now sinking its teeth into political discourse, and it isn't afraid to hide it anymore. The social thriller is today's slasher flick.
It always felt like it wasn't a psychological thriller. It's not quite fitting with the horror. So this idea of social thriller to me is a film or a story that explores the horror of society. Human beings and the way we interact is the bad guy.
Horror's pulling in people who once swore the genre wasn't for them. I don't think that's because the genre's entirely changed, but maybe because it's finally saying something that hits close to home. Whether you agree with art being political, the thing is, always has been. Art movements like Dadaism and Surrealism were all about giving the finger to convention. They cared less about form and more about rebelling against war and nationalism. This new wave of horror is also dropping a lot of the classic tropes in favor of being more politically charged. Maybe it's just another crackpot theory of mine, but I like to think that modern horror's obsession with trauma might have something to do with the state of affairs of the world. I mean, politically? Sure. Environmentally? Disaster. Existentially? Absolute crisis. We could easily turn this into a cultural history and politics lesson, going over every single traumatic event that might have shaped this new wave of storytelling. But I won't. You know why? Because we'd literally be here forever. Just like the Dadaists and Surrealists, maybe we're using horror as a form of protest, a way to scream into the absurd. So horror's been studying psychology longer than most of us have. Apparently the best way to make a monster is to make it out of yourself. Carl Jung, best known for developing analytical psychology, once wrote in a letter, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." That quote-unquote darkness is often the villain in psychological horror, and it might be what Jung would call the shadow. The part of you that thinks things you'd never say out loud, because it would probably land you in jail. Well, what if we're too afraid to face our own demons? Our own shadow? That can't be super healthy, can it? Modern psychology shows that even if you bury these thoughts, it's still there. No matter how much you repress it, push it down, it leaks out anyway, just in weirder forms. Like the mom in The Babadook, or James Sunderland in Silent Hill 2. They're either convinced it's the town, or the monster in the cupboard that's the real evil. Really? Sally Winston, licensed psychologist and executive director of the Anxiety and Stress Disorders Institute of Maryland, explains that these films can put us in a simultaneous state of diffusion and disentanglement. This means that these films let us feel fear without being consumed by it. It's like being able to peer through a window and watch the terror unfold, but you're viewing it from a safe distance. Researchers Miller and Lee, in their essay, Horror Films and Grief, also explored how these movies can help us face our deepest fears. One of their main arguments was that films, because they have a narrative arc, a clear beginning, middle, and end. Just the existence of these fixed boundaries gives us something to latch onto. Some shape, some structure, even amidst the chaos. If we think of horror as a form of exposure therapy for confronting our own demons, there's no surprise that we keep coming back for more. Studies are showing that we're using it as a way to confront our grief, trauma, and our fears in a safe and manageable way. with modern horror now spotlighting all of these issues, makes it even more effective in achieving that. Whether or not you relate to the characters on screen, there's a strong case to be made that these films are giving a voice to the marginalized, those dealing with grief, trauma, and identity. Things we used to bury or struggle to talk about are now being normalized. They help us see ourselves in ways that feel honest and less isolating. In short, they make us feel heard. Maybe these are the types of stories that help give us context to the madness that's outside, but what also might be lurking inside. And this isn't exclusive to film. We're seeing this shift happen in video games as well. Claire Obscure, Returnal, What Remains of Edith Finch, The Last of Us, Hellblade, plenty of others. They're all dealing with themes of loss and trauma in their own way. As Emma Flint wrote in The Guardian, games have the power to normalize grief and offer comfort. And as all art does, they can help us find meaning in our trauma so that we can overcome it. Psychological horror might be the genre that's mastered the concept of the open loop. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect, the fact that our brains can't stand the unfinished. Our minds naturally need to have these loops closed. It's commonly used in good storytelling, like it's everywhere, but it's one of psychological horror's secret weapons. It gives us just enough to notice something's up, but never enough to explain why. We need to know what happened, who did what even led them there. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is often seen as the original blueprint for psychological horror. The genius is in how he structured the film to leave us constantly off balance. Marion, the star of the show, is killed off 46 minutes into the movie. So that's it? The end? Well, killing Marion halfway through does close her arc early, sure. But that creates a new loop. Why did this happen, and who's behind it? As the audience, we're lost, reaching for answers, desperately trying to find closure to every new loop that he keeps opening. Every time we think we understand the story's shape, the rug is pulled yet again, and it all shifts. But by the end of Psycho, we're not just asking, who's the killer? That gets answered. What lingers is the deeper question. What part of their minds collapsed before the deed was done? Even if we don't get answers, the dread thrives because our minds won't rest until we get closure. With the ending of The Witch, there's the ambiguity about how much of it is real and how much of it is projection. And The Babadook, masterclass in this. Even the ending, where the monster is locked up in the basement, feels unresolved, which is the point. And when our brains don't get closure, it'll just have to settle for another of modern horror's favorite storytelling devices. The plot twist. But here's the irony. Our brains actually hate all of this. Yet we're getting so much of it in modern horror. And that's because all of these techniques target a dopamine response from the brain. We don't need to go super deep into the science. This isn't that sort of channel. But you can think of our brains as a prediction machine that's always trying to find meaning in patterns. Subversive plot twists, open loops, get the neurons desperately firing to solve them like a Rubik's Cube. It's like chewing gum for our brain. It's work, but it tastes good, and it's addictive. Dopamine is one hell of a drug, and writers know this. With modern horror now leaning into symbolism and allegory, these reveals don't resolve the tension. It's less about closure, more about confrontation. Take Midsommar. That uncertainty you see in the ending. See what I'm dealing with? Albert Camus once asked if we can imagine Sisyphus happy. In Midsommar, we wonder the same about Danny. What do you think, though? Was it a happy ending? Research on suspense confirms that uncertainty heightens tension, while a twist releases it in a more emotionally satisfying way. Not for everyone, obviously. Don't come at me in the comments saying you hate it. I'm just showing you some of the threads that have led to this change. This topic goes super deep, actually. Like, we could be here for the next hour talking about how your age and personality type affects your tastes in storytelling. But that's another video for another day. Stay subscribed for that one. How's that for an open loop? But yeah, that's kind of the direction that modern horror is headed in. It's now all about letting your interpretation fill in the blanks. Some might say that's a lot scarier, maybe a lot more relatable. What do you think? And this is basically metamodernity in a nutshell. The chaotic dance between sincerity and irony, horror and humor, hope and despair. Where emotional truth matters more than clean answers. It's not afraid of letting us sit with that dissonance. It embraces it. Sometimes it develops throughout the movie. Sometimes it'll unfold throughout a single scene. Hereditary split critics and audiences when it came out. The twist doesn't explain the grief, it just makes it feel like the universe had it out for them the whole time. Viewers either hailed it as today's equivalent of The Exorcist, or walked out confused. Regardless, Toni Collette deserved an Oscar for that one. Not even a nomination. Come on. This isn't a new concept by any means. The Blair Witch Project built its legacy on open-ended horror, never directly showing the witch, but still sparking decades of debate among fans. This kind of ambiguity has always worked, but modern horrors, taking the formula, dialing it up. It's why we have an entire subculture on YouTube dedicated to video essays on this stuff. But look, I'm not trying to downplay these films. I'm not saying that these stories are just a product of capitalism, and that filmmakers are just using psychology against us to keep us addicted and enslaved to our TVs. It's a good premise for a social thriller, though. Or at least a Black Mirror episode. It's meta as hell. Is it good marketing? Yeah, sure. But really, it's just great layered storytelling. Something classic horror hasn't really been known for in the past. I'm really curious how many of you go onto Reddit after watching a film, just to see what other crazy headcanon theories other people have. I'm guilty as charged. So let's wrap this up. Ambiguity sparks debate. And debate creates impact. Impact leads to awards. And awards generate wealth. And wealth creates happiness. And happiness creates... We could be here forever. Overanalyzing elevated horror, whatever you want to call it, until the cows come home. But what if it all boils down to something a lot simpler? We can't really end this conversation without talking about the obvious. Perhaps we're just burned out from the classic horror tropes, tired of slasher villains, bored of haunted dolls, sick of clowns in the drain pipes. Our fascination with the paranormal isn't gone, but the data does show that it's fading, at least in the West. The 80s and the 90s were the golden age of slasher films. Horror was defined by iconic masked killers like Freddy, Jason, and Myers. These villains, they became cultural icons. By the late 90s, movies like Scream were already poking fun at these tropes. It was a sign that audiences were ready for something new. By the mid-2000s, supernatural horror was starting to go out of fashion, and gore-heavy titles like Saw and Hostel were leading the charge. And sure, that was shocking for a while too, but it didn't take long for that to become overplayed either. The more slasher villains, evil clowns, and ways we find to torture people on vacation, the more desensitized we become to them. And this happens across generations. The Exorcist made people faint in the 70s.
Holy Spirit, by this sign of the Holy Cross of our Lord Jesus Christ.
But you watch it now, a lot of younger audiences wouldn't even flinch. Some even straight up laugh at it. That's what overexposure does. Does make you wonder though, does horror shape our fears? Or do our fears shape horror? So what have we learned today? That grief is the new jump scare? That every horror movie needs a metaphor, political discourse, and a trauma arc? That unless your film has at least 3 layers of psychological subtext and shot across 5 different aspect ratios, you're not allowed to call it elevated. So, here's my take. The classic formula, while sure, we can say it might be overplayed and often paired with subpar writing, it's not to say it still can't fucking slap. That campy, nonsensical writing might even be what makes the genre so damn appealing in the first place. These films, they're the fast food of horror, and I genuinely mean that in the best way possible. Not everything has to be a 7-course degustation meal of deliciously deep melodrama. I mean, sure, I love that stuff too, but come on. Whether it's The Thing, Hitchcock's The Bird, Scream, Final Destination 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Goes up to 6, right? There's real art in making us jump out of our seats. And let's be real here. Whether you love the classics or the modern stuff, we all keep coming back to horror for the same reason. To feel something. And that's why the genre fucking rules. Thank you for watching.